Windows needs a new number, Sony has a dagger, and I released an app. Happy Friday, friends. Hopefully you had a wonderful week. There's a lot going on. I can't believe this month is already over. Next month is right around the corner, which means we have the Xbox Showcase. We have Apple's developer event, WWDC. And I've got some time off coming up. I don't know if there'll be a podcast next week. There definitely will not be one the following week. So if you don't get your dose of whatever this is, I do apologize, but I'm taking some time off. I'm heading out with the fams. So anyways, let's jump into the news here because there's a lot going on. Hopefully you had a wonderful week. Let's go. Here we are. Anyways, Notion is now into the Microsoft Store. I use Notion a lot, so I should probably move to this experience. I'm hoping that the update experience is a little bit better than how Notion does it today through their standalone app for Windows. So anyways, this is, the store getting more stuff. I'm wondering if this is related to those recent announcements by Microsoft at Build, but either way, Notion is now into the store. You can also see iTunes in this screenshot. That was such a big deal when that was announced, many years ago. But does anybody use iTunes anymore? I know there's some people. I mean, when you have billions, there's billions of devices out there, right? For iOS, some people I'm sure are still using it, but I just got a new phone earlier this year. My wife just got one not long ago. You definitely don't need iTunes anymore to set this thing up. Does not really matter. There were a ton, and I mean a ton of updates shipped for Windows in preview this week. So you got Click to Do availability in the EU. There's a new Ask Copilot action button in Click to Do. There's Windows search improvements in image description and narrator. Copilot keyboard shortcuts have been improved. There's cross-device resume notifications are now rolling out. Energy saver controls for IT admins for deploying those. HDR and Dolby Vision controls. There's a new FAQ setting in the settings, or FAQ section in the settings. There's new mouse settings for you to customize your mouse experience. New drag tray area, taskbar improvements, and a lot more. They are all on the screen if you want to read them in detail, but it was a pretty bulky update for the world of Windows, at least from shipping things out. And so that's just Microsoft's way of just shipping all the time. You never know when it's coming, but they're all coming in various ways and forms and features and functionality. Also, the IDC is predicting that the PC market is going to grow, which is somewhat shocking, to 274 million units this year. Now, predictions are always whatever. However, when you kind of boil it down to what is going to be driving actually PC growth? Well, first off, we've definitely had some years of lower sales volume, right? You got to remember that. So lower sales volume, and then you have a good year of sales volume, it's going to grow. I'm curious because Windows 10, remember, comes to end of life here in October, unless you're willing to pay for it. But for most people, it'll come to end of life, and so they're expecting that is going to be driving more people to over to the PC side. I don't think it's going to be AI. I don't think it's NPUs, and I don't think it's Copilot Plus PCs or what people are waking up, getting out of bed, going, I need a new Windows PC today. I really think it's just going to be the end of Windows 10 is going to be the driving force to get most people to buy things for Windows or PCs, I should say. So jumping around here a little bit. So Apple is expected to announce iOS 26. And if you're blinking your eyes like I did when I first saw the numbering, they're skipping a bunch. So not iOS 19, they're going to 26. They are going to the year moniker. So basically every OS release will have the 26, even though it's happening in 2025. But they do the same thing with Windows Server does, where they're looking at the year ahead. Their justification, I'm sure, is look, this OS will be in the market for most of 2026, not 2025. Because remember, yes, they will announce it in June, but it will not ship most likely until September or October. And that's for phones. And it's going to be 26 for watches, for the TV, for everything. And I think this is actually a smart move. I'm not talking about they're supposed to be unifying the UI and all these sorts of things. But if you're doing annual updates and you have 3 different version numbers, you get iOS 19, watchOS was a different version, Apple TV was a different, it just makes sense to do this, and that'll be a good thing. I kind of wish the Windows would do these sorts of things as well and clean up their release experience. I know I have complained and talked about it here because so let's just pick one random thing. HDR and Dolby Vision controls are coming to Windows. You have no idea when that's coming to your box. You don't. You might say, well, I'm on release preview. I should be getting it any time now. But that's if they're not doing any A/B testing. That's if you meet all the demand. It's impossible. Anyways, they need Microsoft, just please go back to one update per year. It makes a ton of sense. The thing that just kills me the most, more than anything else, is Microsoft loses the ability to have marketing events that are dedicated to Windows, right? If they are shipping updates and features all the time at will and randomly without any sort of logical cadence that the consumer can follow, I'm sure there's some logic internally, but none of us really understand it. How can you stand up and say, like, look, here's the Windows event of things that are coming to Windows PCs when they might ship in February or June or July or August or October when 25H2 ships, right? Microsoft, I don't know. It would be interesting and dare I say bold of Microsoft to try to do what Apple is doing, but give us one Windows update per year, so there can be one Windows event where we see all the things that are coming. It doesn't matter if they're not coming immediately like that following that event, but like if you can just say, look, we're going to announce all these things at build or around that time, and then they will ship to everyone by October, and then don't ship anything again, bug fixes not included, until the next year. Like give it hurts me that Windows just doesn't get the prominence that it deserves inside the world of Microsoft, and it's always just this thing that has to exist, and something like it honestly at times feels like they only update and do these things for Windows because they have to, not because they want to. So anyways, speaking of things that I did, and when I say I released an app, it was my company, but I lead the team that does all this. We released Fences 6 this week, and so there's tabs, but the coolest thing here is actually you can now tint all of your icons to a single hue. So in this example, like you can see here, the bird, which is my favorite image because the bird is just looking at him. You can see all the icons are not crazy colors. Like they're like, even the PDFs are not red. They're the same color hue. It creates a really unique expression for the desktop. I really dig it. I'm really happy with it. Anyways, Fences 6, there'll be links down in the description because a spoiler or whatever clarity, this is my job. This is what I do. I build apps for Windows over at Stardock. So anyways, on to the gaming news. So there's a lot happening in the world of gaming. So right now, Microsoft is in a weird little, they got a lot of pressure on them right now for various reasons. But one of them is that the Steam OS is really hurting Windows when it comes to running games on these handheld mobile devices, because there's now Steam OS, which can run on a Legion Go S, and it can run both. So basically, you have same hardware, different software, and Steam OS does decently better than Windows. Now, Windows still has advantages because it is Windows and can do more things. However, if you're buying it for purely gaming, SteamOS has advantages as well. So this is keeping pressure on Microsoft to not just be like, it's good enough, we have no competition. Like, you have competition. If you're not careful here, SteamOS will year of the desktop, or year of the Linux desktop. So other things happening somewhat related to that. So according to Jez, the Xbox first-party handheld isn't launching with the hardware that we were expecting to be coming. Now, this is not saying that Microsoft is not building a console. He made it very clear, and I continue to believe so. This is accurate as well. The next generation Xbox console does exist. It is fully greenlit and is coming to market. So meaning the plastic box that sits under your TV, that thing. The handheld device, according to Jez, has been delayed but not canceled. However, in the world of Microsoft, delayed and canceled, delayed for how long? Indefinitely? We don't know, because for a couple reasons. One, Microsoft hasn't even announced this thing. So it's not like they've announced a piece of hardware like they've done with Surface in the past, the Surface Neo, and then it just never ships, and then delayed indefinitely never arrives. This is, right, these are insider reports, so things are evolving. You would have to think that Microsoft's strategy and changes at the company, you look at how they're doing things right now, is related to this, right? Hardware is expensive. Hardware is risky. Microsoft doesn't have a great track record with selling a lot of hardware. And so the TLDR here is that the handheld isn't going to be right around the corner like some of us were expecting. Now, the report suggests that Microsoft is focusing more on the software side to try to make Windows be a better gaming platform, which, okay, yes, that is a good thing, but like, shouldn't that always been a thing? Like, Why did it take? And I can guarantee you, it's not related to this. Well, it could be related to SteamOS being more performant, but it wasn't like, hey, this performant report came out 2 days ago, and Microsoft like reshuffled the deck in the last 24 hours. Said this is what we're doing, and then it all spilled out. This is something that has been longer focused because they have to, right? Like if they're building the thing that we think they are building for the next gen console, which is more of a software horizontal layer that can be run on multiple devices, be it the full Xbox experience, you're going to need Windows to be more performant so that it can run these Xbox games natively, right? That was the whole pitch for this sort of first-party Xbox handheld, is that it ran Xbox games and not PC games that are on these Play Anywhere platforms, but like true Xbox games. So yeah, there's some things Microsoft trying to make Windows better for gaming, which good, but I feel like that should have been like always the case because, right, they are the world's largest gaming platform for PCs, right? That is a thing. Steam runs on Windows. So anyways, Microsoft, don't be looking for that handheld anytime soon. Well, technically not canceled according to the report, delayed and for how long are very different questions. So, and then Sony came out with a dagger. So, as you may remember, Xbox raised their prices, and then Sony comes out and says, hey, look, we're going to slash prices on the PS5 consoles. Now, my comments are probably going to blow up just like Twitter did, saying like, Sony does this every year. They run this sale always in the first week of June or right around the first week of June. Brad, you are so wrong, and that blah, 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 this is not a throw at Xbox. Here's the thing, guys. Here's the thing. Microsoft is a $1 trillion company. They have infinite level of resources. Microsoft should have known that Sony, hey guys, we're going to raise the prices of Xbox. Does Sony do any sales, I don't know, every time of the year consistently and historically? Somebody should have said, yeah, they do it during the first week of June. And then somebody should have said, okay, how about we hold our price increases until July so that when Sony announces these price cuts temporarily, because they're usually only a week or two, we don't look like we have an egg on our face. And nobody did. Nobody did. So yes, these are sales that happen every year. It doesn't change the fact and the real ugly fact that right now with this sale, you can buy a full PS5 digital console with Call of Duty Black Ops for less than an Xbox Series S 1 terabyte without Black Ops. So like this is just a self-inflicted wound that Microsoft could have very easily avoided. Yes, they probably were going to raise prices anyways, but if you know that your competitor always has a sale right around the first week of June, and you know that it always drives a lot of headlines because of it, maybe just wait. Like, did they really make that much more money between then and now? I guarantee that Microsoft thought Sony probably wasn't going to run the sale. That's the naive or maybe thought. I don't even know how to contextualize that, thinking that Sony wasn't going to run the sale. But Sony did. Actually, there were reports that Sony stockpiled a bunch of consoles right before the potential tariffs landing so that they could potentially do this. And so, like, all the things were there lined up saying Sony's going to do this. But I think Microsoft thought, like, hey, they raised their prices overseas. They're not going to do a sale here in the US, but guarantee this is going to drive a lot of PlayStation sales because of all the narratives of prices of consoles going up. And so Sony deserves credit for this well-maneuvered tactical thing. Also, it's also very important that the Switch 2 is launching during this time frame. So Sony is like, look, our competitors just raised their pricing, our direct competitors, and then we also have Nintendo, who is a big competitor in the industry, is going to launch their console that is more money than what we are now selling this console for with Black Ops. And so it's a good tactical maneuver by Sony to move more console units. So there you go. There you go. Anyways, on to the questions of the week, because there are a lot of them, and I probably should have brought some water over here to take a drink. Anyways, 24 Bauer says, given the current trend for raising hardware prices amongst the big three, at what point do you think the average consumer gets priced out of the market? It's a good question because we have a comparable here. At what price point does the average consumer get priced out of PC gaming? Now, many people, and rightfully so, will point out that PC game, while it is very large, like the demographic is very large, it's not casual consumers doing PC games unless it's like in a browser. You know what I mean? Like the casual user is not going and going to PCPartPicker.com and orchestrating their perfect gaming layout and color scheme. So It is a very good question, and I think we will find out. There's no magic number where it's like, okay, it's $500, everybody's in, $512, everybody's out. Now, Microsoft knows how sensitive consumers are on pricing, and most large companies know this, which is the pure reason the Xbox Series S exists. They were trying to attract that lower price point market, which, by the way, the Series S was outselling the X for a long time. However, that is somewhat distilled information because there were fewer X's to be purchased, so people would just go and pick up an S more than likely instead of getting the X because based off availability. I don't have a specific number in mind, but I feel like we're going to find out. And so I think the Switch 2 will be a bit of a canary, if you will, because the Switch 2 is over $500 when you bring everything together that you really want. And so is that going to be too much? What is their demand velocity going to look like? Their sell-through rate? I guarantee they're going to sell every single console at release. But remember, it's not the release window that is the most important time. It's the months and years after. It's like, what is the sustainability of their pricing? And so maybe by starting out higher, it will give them more opportunity to chip away at the pricing, but we will find out. Gunny says, hello, Brad. Do you think the Xbox handheld or next gen will have Steam OS and Windows? Thank you for your time. Well, thank you, Gunny, for listening. I don't think it's going to have Steam OS. Now, it might support Steam games, which is a totally different thing, but I don't think it's going to ship with Steam OS. That would be crazy because Microsoft makes Windows. Microsoft owns Windows. Microsoft needs Windows to be that premier platform for gaming, and they don't want to acknowledge that Steam OS is a potentially better platform. They've already got a couple headlines like Steam OS does better. If like they have these things side by side where it's like, okay, if you want to play Forza, well, it'll be booted into Windows, but if you're going to play, I don't know, Age of Empires, then you should boot into Steam OS. Age of Empires is probably a bad example, but GTA 6, we'll just use that since it's a third-party title. And so they want to avoid that. I just don't think they would do it more so for the philosophy of Windows should be the premier platform. And I can see leadership being like, what are you doing? Like, if Windows OS isn't as good for gaming as Steam OS, fix Windows. Don't ship the other OS. So Mr. DB Cross says, give us an update on Doom progress. So I have completed 2 more chapters since last week. It's been a slow journey. I think, right? I'm not trying to just plow through this. And he says, are you collecting all the toys and secrets? Or are you just slashing and shooting to complete levels? I think it depends on the levels, right? I'm definitely on the lookout for gold and the obvious sort of things like, right, you can pull up the map and sort of see secret areas. I definitely go and explore some of those things. But part of me, like, depending on like, hey, is the kid going to bed or something like that, I might try to plow through, especially some boss battles or something towards the end of each of the levels. So I think I'm on chapter 5 at this point. At the current rate, I'll finish it by the end of summer. So there you go. William says, hey, Brad, long-time viewer, first-time question. Welcome, William. I heard you mention Stardock is seemingly hundreds of podcasts, but never admittedly looked into it. I'm a developer and was wondering if you could quick sell me on buying one or multiple tools that you offered that may be beneficial. Thanks. Okay, first off, that is not a paid comment placement. So, first off, multiplicity. So we sell a lot of tools, but there's 3 primary tools. There's Start 11, which replaces the start menu with a fully customized experience and has oodles and oodles of options, remove all the ads and everything else, fully customize it to your desire. We have Fences. Fences is what we just released. Is that this one? Nope. Is that this one? Nope. There we go. Is this one. So what Fences does is it organizes your desktop into the shaded areas we call fences. But this release has tabs and everything else. So this organizes it extremely well. What's really cool with Fences is there's a thing called folder portals. So if you use like any folder within File Explorer, so downloads, or in my case, we use OneDrive at work. So you can have multiple folder portals, by the way, but you have a viewport into that folder without having to open File Explorer. So what Fences does from a developer perspective, you will spend infinitely less time in File Explorer because you can do it all from the desktop right from within these windows. It's super cool. By the way, everything has a free trial and it's like $10. $10 for the year. If you want to own it forever, it's $29. Some people get really wound up. It's like $10. It's like, hey, it's $10 for a year. People are paying that for lattes several times a week. Anyways, not to get off on that tangent. And then the other one, which I'm using quite literally right now, is Multiplicity 4. So Multiplicity is a wireless or virtualized KVM. So if you have multiple devices, especially if you're a developer, so I have one mouse, I have one keyboard, I have 2 computers here. I have the laptop right in front of me. And then I have the computer that's actually recording this and doing all the fancy animations and everything else. They're two separate boxes, one mouse, one keyboard, both devices. However, Multiplicity has a ton more than just wireless KVM functionality. You can actually use it like a remote desktop tool on your network. So when I go upstairs to do things, I can actually come down here, or it's just like it's a KVM window is what we call it. And it allows me to access all of my other devices on my network without having to like physically go there or be able to see them. And you can stream all your monitors. So this box down here actually has a better GPU than my box upstairs. So when I'm doing LLM stuff, like when I'm doing localized AI playing around, I actually use this box from upstairs in a window replicated on the monitor so it looks like it's native because it has a better GPU for more tokens per second. So those are the three. Everything has a free trial. Everything's, I think, budget friendly. We don't have anything that's like $1,000 by any means, and every single thing can be purchased permanently. Not everything. Everything can be purchased individually if you want. Fences can be purchased $10 per year, but it's also $29 to own it forever. So there you go. There's the pitch off of the pitch box. Silentium says, "Hello, Brad. You touched on this in a recent podcast last week, but when it comes to the next-gen Xbox console, if Microsoft does go with the strategy of multiple hardware options, with the majority of them being OEMs, how do you think Microsoft will position their hero of the Xbox console?" So we already have a model for this. It's the Surface. Well, I'm using a Surface right now. So this guy, you can't see the logo on the back, but it's a Surface. It's Surface Laptop Studio. Go look at how Microsoft positions the Surface. That is going to be it. That is their model. That is, I guarantee this is, look, we can do what we did with Surface, where Surface builds this thing, and then this is like the hero box, and then vendors can do other things. They can have bundles, they can whatever else. And I think that's going to be the model that we see. If you go look in buying a Surface, there's not a lot of frills and extras, right? There's no antivirus software. There's none of that bloatware. Oh gosh, if they start putting bloatware on these Xbox consoles, that will be the death of it. I guarantee Microsoft will hold these things very stringent for experiences, and because they don't want to tarnish the Xbox brand, but they may not be in control. Like they might say, look, it must have a minimum of 512 gigs of storage, but you might be able to find a 4 terabyte. The thing I think we're going to see most is the not the lowering of benchmarks, because all of PC hardware today is actually equal to, if not better than, the performance of the Xbox. Yes, there's things like velocity drives, but like go throw a Gen 5 NVMe stick into any PC, and you might even be faster, or at least equal to. So by the time we're at next year, as long as it's like NVMe 5 drives, we need a certain number of cores or something like that. So yeah. I think that they're just going to position as like, look, this is a clean experience. This is what you know and love. Then there's these other options. I mean, look at these handheld devices from ROG Ally. Are we seeing a lot of friction from the Microsoft side? Now, granted, Microsoft doesn't have a handheld yet, but there are multiple of these things out there. I think these are all, I don't want to say experiments, because that is probably not completely accurate, because of just the nature of what is going on. But they're testing the waters, if you will, about how to go to market, especially the one coming with the Xbox button itself. I think is going to be the best learning experience. And says, do you think it will be spec considerably high end with an accompanying price point? I think we're going to see varying price points. I think that's sort of the model here, is that we're going to see, there will certainly be a floor, because Microsoft will dictate it has to have certain number of cores, certain number of drive, or certain number of IO, right? Maybe does it have to have an NPU? We don't know. Whatever that baseline spec is, there's a certain floor that you will not be able to drop below, at least initially, right? Lenovo and AMD and all these guys, they have certain fixed prices for their products. So there's a floor. We will definitely see high-end, like the best Xbox gaming experience things from these high-end game makers, which is fine. I mean, is anyone really going to complain if they have better experiences? I think we as Xbox gamers have to get used to the fact that Xbox is going to be much more PC-like next generation than console-like next generation. So Jonathan says, Brad, since the Xbox showcase is on the horizon, have you heard any rumblings about unannounced titles that might be shown up? Thanks. Oh, yes, plenty, but I don't want to spoil things. I used to do that a lot, and then people got real angry with me. So we're right around the corner. Just enjoy it. Just enjoy it, I think, is the best way to describe it. Although Gears looks like it's going to be great. So Silentium says, hi, Brad. When it comes to Microsoft's suspected strategy of OEMs making Xbox consoles, what do you think the incentives are for them to do so? the incentives are the de-riskification of Xbox, right? If you want an Xbox right now, you have one option. You go to Microsoft. Microsoft goes to the manufacturers. Microsoft gets it made. Microsoft brings it back, and you buy it. Now, with this strategy, Lenovo, Acer, Asus, Dell, all these individual players can then go to the market, get these things built, and then bring it back. And then you have options, and Microsoft doesn't have to spend as much capital building a console. So it's definitely a risky strategy, but I think at this point, we can all sort of agree, it's given the direction and velocity that Microsoft is moving in a new direction, it's the one that makes the most sense. So, Sydney 2K says, I've recently learned of a service called ZeroPatch, and then he wrote, or ZeroPatch, which offers a service to extend the life of unsupported Windows OS by security micropatches. What are your thoughts on these services? The candid answer is I don't know enough about them. I've read at them at a high level that basically, in some respects, you can take patches applied to Windows 11 and definitely make them available for Windows 10. If you are highly concerned about security, if you're highly concerned about all of that stuff, like, why would you do this? Now, I understand that people want Windows 10 and people do not want to leave Windows 10. I get that, right? Windows 10 will be known as, even though it's not completely true, as the last OS without AI, even though Microsoft is like ruining that too. So I get why people want to do this. I get that they have hardware that may not want to do it. And I'm saying that these aren't bad options. I just don't know enough to trust a third party to patch my system at the end of the day. That's about the best that I can tell you. William says, since Sony put their PS5s on sales, do you think Xbox will put their consoles on sale? I think that is see, this is where Microsoft is screwed, because if they do, if Microsoft comes and says, all right, well, the tariffs didn't materialize, we're actually going to cut prices now temporarily. Like, that is such a joke, because they came out and said, look, we're going to raise prices. This is what they are. And then a couple months later, not even a couple months, it's like Sony cut pricing. Microsoft's like, oh, actually, sorry, bro, we're going to cut prices. Well, first off, what do you tell anybody, which I'm sure there's not tons of, who actually just bought a console at those higher prices? So now you've got to deal with that in some capacity. And then Microsoft has to sit there and say, like, well, maybe the tariffs, maybe we screwed up. And then the headlines would be like, Microsoft reacts to Sony and cuts prices, even though Microsoft knew the following things, that, hey, they always do sales during this time of the year. Also, they knew that the Switch 2 was coming. I think Microsoft's gamble was that they wanted to be matched in line with the Switch 2 pricing. And so they're like, look, someone might look at the Switch 2 and then say, I could just get an Xbox Series X for the same price and then be done. But then Sony came in with a good strategy and came in and undercut them. So if they put their consoles on sale, it's like, yeah, that's great. But it's more of like, what are you guys doing? Like, if they put them on sale to the prices they were previously to the price hike, does that even make any sense? Ugh. And Joe Vieira, I believe is how you pronounce it, says, Brad, we all know that Xbox loves to sell controllers right. So what has Xbox to lose to let you play on the next gen with a PlayStation controller if anyone wants it? So there's technical issues there that you have to consider. First off, all Xbox games are set up for an Xbox controller. You have to remember that on a PlayStation controller, just as one example, there's 4 buttons up top. I have a PlayStation controller around here somewhere, right? There's R1, R2, L1, L2 as well. Xbox isn't set up for that. So you got to account and deal with those for some way. And you'd be like, yeah, well, you just map them or whatever. It's just one minor thing. Second, the Xbox consoles, at least the current iteration, uses a proprietary communication mechanism, right? It's not Bluetooth. Now, if it is just straight Bluetooth next gen, it might work. Like, that might work. But Bluetooth is a little bit non-performant for some of this stuff, so that might be another spec requirement that Microsoft requires. And Microsoft has already done this before with the Surface Studio, not the laptop studio. The proper one actually had that RF emitter built in, so you could use a native Xbox controller with the Surface laptop, or Surface desktop, I should say. I keep saying laptop, that's what I'm looking at. I don't think that they will do it. I don't think they might work. Let me qualify that. You might be able to use a PlayStation controller on the next gen console because of Bluetooth, but this isn't something Microsoft is going to come out and be boisterous about, if you will. So while it could, and he goes on to say, this could welcome people over from PlayStation side because they don't have to buy something. It is in that respect, meaning if you can just turn any device into a true Xbox, not Xbox Play Anywhere, not Xbox Cloud Gaming, but a true Xbox, then it might make a little sense, but I don't think, again, that they would promote it. It would just be like, hey, you can use your Bluetooth controller with your laptop, log into the Xbox experience, and it will function in some respect. So it's an interesting thought. I'll give it that for sure. So Great questions this week, guys. As always, my favorite part is communicating and chatting with you all. So hopefully everybody had a wonderful week. And as always, make sure to keep it subscribed here because only BS on this podcast is me.